Hello, hey, howdy, how you doing? How is everybody? Another deep dive with SBCU here. Super excited for this week's topic, the brand new latest and greatest mirror saddle. I've got two special guests as riders. These are two best friends that you didn't know you had. I'm pleased to present the rock star of body geometry, fit, and retool everything of the like, Mr. Scott Holz, as well as the product manager for the mirror saddle himself, live and in the flesh, Garrett Getter. Thanks for coming to us. And I mean, you guys truly make the experience what it is for riders, right? You could talk wheels and tires, geometry, kinematics, full suspension, this, everything else, future shock that. But really, when it comes down to fit, touch points from the rider to the bike, it's possible to say nothing's going to make quite an impactful measure to your experiences what these two guys do for you and for us in general by better understanding body mechanics and production processes and coming to market with these things. So without further ado, I suppose, here we are, mirror saddle. Garrett, can you introduce yourself to us?
Thanks, Jared. Hey, everyone. My name is Garrett Getter. I am the product manager for saddles, grips, and tapes for Specialized bicycle components, obviously. And a little bit of background. I started my tenure with Specialized back in 2012. I was an intern with Retül, as we all know, the bike fitting technology and now methodology within Specialized, and then worked my way up the ranks, moving more into education and fitting our S racing athletes, and of course that's kind of how that is how I met Scott Holz, and then that eventually led to me moving into more of a product position as a way to kind of take it to the next level. And so I'm super excited to be here, super excited to talk mirror and body geometry and fit with Scott and Jared and everyone else.
Great, Garrett, thanks. And Scott, you've been on with us before. We had sort of laid out a general overview of body geometry. We're getting a little bit more pointed today in our conversation. Our subject matter, of course, is anything but pointed, and we'll get a little bit more into that. But thanks again for coming here. And so you've worked with Garrett for quite a while in a few different capacities. Can you give us a little background on the two of you working together, and maybe a little refresher on your own background with Specialized too?
Yeah, thanks, Jared. Absolutely. So I've been with Specialized now for 13 years. I started out working as an instructor in SBCU, teaching fit. Eventually worked into developing the entire fit program for the global business, and then took over the SBCU program a few years ago, again on a global level. But one of my favorite projects of the entire time I've been Specialized was back in 2012, was when Specialized partnered with Retül, and that's actually when Garrett and I met. So Specialized, purchased Retül in 2012, and the staff that was there was an incredible group of fitters and engineers and even software and hardware developing people. So it was a completely new group of people to be around. And Garrett was an intern at the time, working in the fit studios and doing fits. And he and I started working together at Retül, and then fitting together. Garrett worked in SBCU helping teach fit for a while in the SBCU program. And then like Garrett said, we've traveled to many pro tour team camps in Europe, working with our riders and solving problems for riders on our pro tour teams. And it's been super cool to see Garrett now develop into one of the product managers at Specialized, and then super proud of him to have a situation where we've got a product like Mirror that's just one of the most advanced body geometry products ever made. And yeah, it's been a pretty cool year for saddles and technology and where we're going.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Scott. It's altogether inspiring. I know I'm anticipating walking away from this conversation really eager to plant my tuchus on one of these and get going on the trail. Quick question, since both of you have done so much traveling, working with pro tour teams and elite athletes and things like that, do either of you have just any personal takeaways from some of the more interesting challenges that you may have had in dealing with these athletes? Or has it been pretty smooth sailing?
Scott, you want to start?
There's definitely stories about different riders, and some are probably ones we wouldn't necessarily always want to share. But I think one of the biggest things that I've learned from working with professional riders is that they have the same problems that we do, that us normal people have on bikes. They're just amplified by time and mileage. I mean, most of us don't get the opportunity to spend 7 or 8 hours a day on our bike, weeks at a time. But when you do that, even if there's just something that's a small level of discomfort that's in your equipment, and you're on it for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, that becomes a major problem. So things that we might not notice as, even enthusiasts or even somewhat elite level riders, when you get to that pro level, they notice everything. And that's where we're able to learn so much from them. And saddles, of course, that I would say, Garrett, that, we have learned so much about saddles from our pro riders because just the amount of time they spend on the bike.
Yeah, I think I kind of think of professional athletes like I think of Formula One cars and Formula One cars and a normal pickup truck, right? Like they both have wheels, they both have engines, but one has a lot of telemetry, a lot of input, a lot of senses that most of us kind of, I guess, normal people don't in some ways. And so, yeah, you'll learn a lot about athletes and how your product works for that type of rider. That is pretty unique and in a good way and in a challenging way too. So yeah, I must say, like over the course of years working with Scott and learning a ton about how to work with professional athletes in that way is you learn a lot about how their needs differ from other riders, and then also how similar those issues can be.
Sure. You ever find yourselves being a little starstruck, or is it just, are you just all business?
I'll say, because I'm the greener person. Scott's been in this longer, and I'm sure he's got his stories. But I would say, like, I think I did like 4 or 5 years of team camps, and I would say the first 2 years, I was like, this is like, I have hit my pinnacle of my professional bike fitting career for sure, because it was like everything that you got to experience and see was kind of behind the scenes, which is so different from what a lot of folks get to see. And yeah, it was super cool. And then obviously seeing these athletes out doing their thing, winning races, being in the limelight was awesome.
Yeah, what a great opportunity. Scott, anything from you?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's incredible is, when we get to go to these team camps, especially, I can go back a little further because as we started doing this with team camps, God, I think it was like 2010 or 11 was one of the first team camps we went to. And, back then, basically the bike fitting was done by the mechanics, and everything was very, very traditional. And a lot of the teams were, they were kind of skeptical. They're like, what are these Americans going to teach us about bike fit? Because, they had the iometer, and it's like, that looks good. And, what looks good is a slam stem on a head tube. And, it was, so in those days, it was fairly challenging. And I mean, Yeah, in terms of kind of a little bit of just learning what these riders were like, I'll never forget working at one of my first team camps, and we asked Fabian Cancellara to get up on his time trial bike on a trainer, and we wanted to, start working on his position. And he's like, well, how hard do you want me to go? And we're like, well, can you do a time trial effort for a few minutes? And he's like, yeah, no problem. And he just started cranking out like 500 watts, like it was nothing on a trainer. And he's just sustained like 500 watts in his aero position. And I'm like, how do you do that? And then he actually melted the tire. So we had to come up with a different set of wheels and a couple training tires and stuff for him, because we just destroyed a tire on a trainer at 500 watts. So that was kind of amazing. But I think as you start to work with these guys, you start to realize that they're riders like us. They just do it a lot more. But you have riders that are total equipment geeks and want to know everything. They're super into it. You've got other riders that just get on the bike and pedal. They're like, what do you want me to do? It's pretty interesting to see, where they're at. But at the end of the day, I think the thing that always brings you down to earth when you're working with these guys is that you are helping them do their job better. And they're putting their faith in you to give them advice, make suggestions. And of course they have the opportunity to act on those suggestions or not. And that's, what we give them the information of what we think is going to improve their riding and their performance. And ultimately there's usually a dialogue that goes back and forth about, what's going to work, what's not going to work. We do a lot of follow-up throughout the year, understanding how things are developing. So it's, at the end of the day, that you start realizing you're just working with somebody to help better their career, and the kind of the starstruck aspect kind of goes away once you get to that point. But then every once in a while I'll get home and I'll tell my wife about the camp and what we did. And like Garrett said, it's kind of like, wow, this is amazing. I feel so fortunate that I get to do this every year and work with these people and that I know them. When you have a rider like Alaphilippe, walking through a hotel hallway and he stops to talk to you about his ride that day, you kind of go, God, I can't believe this is what I get to do. So it's pretty fascinating.
Absolutely. I mean, as a fan, as an enthusiast of the sport, as we all are, I can only imagine that's got to be hugely gratifying to know that you are in a position to make some positive changes and be influential. And Scott, you were on the leading edge of it. So what a hurdle I can imagine that you had in those early days that really weren't that long ago, trying to overcome tradition, right? If nothing else, the iometer and everything else that was done, I more or less rooted simply in tradition, right? And I heard this great phrase one time that tradition is nothing more than peer pressure from dead people, which I thought was pretty fantastic. But we're not talking about tradition. We're kind of breaking tradition in a lot of ways with the subject matter of this. And, fast forward to today and what Garrett's doing. And now, you're in a position to come to market with a revolutionary product, groundbreaking, that truly has the capacity to positively impact people's experiences, both at the elite level and across the board, everywhere, and put us in a position where the future is looking better than ever, from my perspective as a rider. Can we start diving into it a little bit? Tell us a little bit more about what we're looking at, what we're talking about today.
Yeah, sure. So I'll say like a little behind the scenes story about Mirror. I was 2 months into being the product manager for Saddles, and for anyone that has worked for Specialized and comes into it, and for most jobs for that matter, it's drinking from a fire hose, like just taking in, absorbing so much information. And even for someone that's been with the company for 6 years already coming into it, there was still so much new to learn. And I'll say when we kicked off the project, it was, hey Garrett, we've just created this great relationship with this company, Carbon Inc. You should make a saddle with it. And that was kind of how it all started. So that's a really big daunting task, right? Nobody's made 3D printed saddles. I'm just getting into product management. And I can honestly say the experience through fitting and working with saddles, body geometry, specifically saddles from Body Geometry, from Specialized, totally helped me kind of really take Mirror and make it what it is now. And yeah, we'll just kind of start rolling through some slides I've got here and take it from there. And so, talking about body geometry, when it at its very core, like when we talk about body geometry, we identify the problem that a rider is facing, we try to solve it through design, and then we validate it with science, right? And that has served us well for so many years, over 20, right? So that is exactly the process we went through to create this product, right? We had this new technology, limitless potential. We have to start somewhere, and really, we stuck to the core process of how we develop a body geometry product. And we've seen through the years, like, body geometry started back in 1998 with this first saddle, right? Like, the first body geometry saddle called, and Scott, please correct me if I'm wrong, was it called the Wedge? The Wedge saddle? I'm pretty
I believe
sure
it was the Mincow Wedge
Mincow,
you're referring
the
to,
Mincow Wedge,
which is that cutout on the back. But
yep.
Scott, what was this? Was this the Roman?
No, this was just Specialized body geometry saddle at the time, and the main feature was the Mincow Wedge, which was the first step in relieving pressure on the arteries and the nerves that run along the pelvis. So this was really what this was all about, was using only essentially one variable at the time, which was shape, and maybe a little bit in terms of the foam density, but for the most part, we're working, going from a traditional saddle shape to a completely different shape in an effort to move the pressure that a rider experiences on the saddle into a place that was a lot safer, especially at that time for male riders, and that were experiencing blood flow challenges and nerve damage. So the whole point here was change the contact point to where you transfer the pressure to a more acceptable place.
Yeah, and I think probably, and just going back to the fundamentals of body geometry, like, the reason this product exists was because there was a problem that was brought to Specialized attention, right? It was that article in Bicycling Magazine from a researcher saying that, hey, if you're a male cyclist and you ride bikes, you probably have erectile dysfunction. And I'll be honest, 1998 for me, I was a young lad. I don't remember this, even though I was such a geek in all those magazines, like, just going nuts. I probably just overlooked this. Scott, do you remember this? Like, do you remember this article? Like,
I don't remember the article itself. Like, I'm not sure if I actually picked up the magazine in 1997. I was racing pretty seriously at that time, and on traditional saddles. And I remember when this saddle came out, and I was like, wow, that is so trippy looking. And it was so different than everything that we were riding on at the time and racing. And I think one of the things that was interesting was, it was so non-traditional looking. You kind of wanted to just try it just because it was so different. And the other thing is, and I'm sure a lot of people have experienced this, once you start riding saddles that take the pressure off of soft tissue, and then you try to go back to what you were riding before, that's when you really realize, like, oh, this is so different. And the way that you can move pressure around on a saddle it's pretty incredible when you think about what just the shape alone can do. And then, as Garrett's going to talk later, when we start talking about the other variables that we can do to move pressure, it just, we've come a long way, but this was absolutely the start of something that's changed cycling. And I think, Garrett, one of the things that's interesting too, you talk about the younger generation of cyclists. there's a lot of cyclists now that have only been riding for 10 or 15 years, and they don't even realize that there was an issue. And I think it's one of those things. It's pretty cool that because of design, there's a lot of people that don't even recognize that we once had a problem with cycling and saddles.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. It's like, I think that really resonated with me. I had seen, I think it might have been you or someone else gave a presentation on body geometry, and it was like, man, 20 years ago, like there are so many cyclists now that had no idea. That's pretty cool. Cool. So yeah, 20 years ago, the wedge saddle, first body geometry saddle, and then most recently, mimic technology, which is obviously a huge evolution, right? And there's a few things in between, right? We introduced a really amazing shape in the power saddle. Obviously that was a huge leap forward in shape, and that in itself was we've seen such success with riders and being comfortable on their saddle, and now introducing obviously mimic technology, really our first foray into anatomically specific zonal densities of foam to try to deal with pressure equilibrium. And mimic technology, again, I'm probably going to sound like a broken record on this this deck, which is, we started with a real problem, right? Ali Tetrick came to us, kind of enlightening us about a problem we didn't really know existed. And, my understanding of that was, Andy Pruitt and Jackie Cohen really kind of did exactly, it's like at the real ethos of body geometry, which was to listen to riders, to hear this problem, and to say, wow, we have a real opportunity to come up with something new and different.
Yeah, and we did just that. Now, when you talk about zonal density foams and things of the sort, can I ask you to elaborate a little bit more on what exactly that means?
Yeah, totally. I think, you look around the industry and just look at our lineup, for instance, we have always focused on different widths, different shapes, and some padding level differences. But, in any of those situations, the difference in like the firmness or the softness of the foam is really kind of, it's pretty much the same across the saddle. You've got like one density throughout. And with mimic technology, it was the first time we said, hey, the sit bones, of course, we want, a really supportive foam for sit bones. We want a really soft memory foam nose. And then we also want a soft but supportive cutout, right? Which is very different from what we've traditionally done. So yeah, that's kind of what I mean there.
Got it. And I imagine comes with a whole host of manufacturing challenges and hurdles and things that we needed to overcome and face to bring this product to market.
Yeah, when you think about, there's 4 different shapes of foam in 4 unique densities. That from a manufacturing standpoint is, it takes work. This was a saddle that took over 3 years to develop. Just, going back and forth, getting it right, going through the entire process of designing this, it takes time, to cut those tools and all that.
Totally.
So that's obviously the real, segueing into mirror. That is one real opportunity we have, right? We talk about, when you think about mimic, it was, 2 cover materials, 4 different shapes of foam, different densities of foam, and then bringing that all together into one product. Whereas, the mirror saddle, which you're looking at here, is one piece. And that, that's kind of mind blowing to me when I think about that. But, one piece that has a lot of the same performance characteristics of Mimic, but then takes it a step further. And that's obviously where 3D printing really kind of sets us apart for that.
Absolutely.
So just going a little bit deeper and talking about, Mimic before we move into Mirror, what was the problem we were trying to solve for when we created Mimic? And that was really, when it comes down to it, was about pressure equilibrium. We were trying to deal with peak pressure on the anterior part of the pelvis, the vulva, specifically for women, because this was really a problem women were facing. And then, edema, trying to support the labia more, instead of having this pooling of blood where a cutout traditionally was, to actually support the labia more. And that, that obviously took a lot of research to figure out and to learn. But yeah, when it comes down to it, the reason for those different densities of foam, different cover materials is still at the, the foundation of body geometry saddles, which is to try to, promote soft tissue health. And so, yeah, ischemia and edema are both, physiological issues that specifically women were facing. And that was why we developed Mimic. And then to really talk about how we took it a step further with Mirror, it's a similar process. We started with, okay, cool. We know Mimic is super successful. We are getting emails from our fitters, from our riders, saying like, this has changed the game for them. And that, of course, for us is amazing, but we can't rest on our laurels. It's like, what is next? And Scott, feel free to jump in on this one too. Through my years of fitting, anytime I'd hear from a customer, and this was like any level of customer, like pro tour, world tour rider, all the way to like, hey, I'm just getting out, I want to do like 20 miles a day, twice a week type of rider. If they came in with, any issues with their saddles, the first saddle I would reach for was the power saddle, just because it was so different. And, one of the reasons it was different was obviously the shorter nose, the kind of very abrupt but supportive flare of the saddle, and then the big cutout. And, that saddle, when someone would sit on it for the first time, often folks will say, wow, like I have never felt so supported. It's like great anatomical support and promotes that soft tissue health. But, for most riders, that's like, wow, it takes some time to adapt. And, one thing we found, like just doing some more research, and a lot of it came from ischemia and edema. I was like, where is, like ischemia, peak pressure, this is a soft tissue issue. Where does it fall into like bone? And is it bone that's, this adaptation? And, one thing I really found as we were going through the research was, for some riders, ischial bursitis is really a thing. Like they sit on these really supportive saddles, and it can result in achiness through the sit bones. And for some folks, that ischial bursitis is like way down the road and may not even be a result of sitting on the saddle. It can be sitting on a park bench for hours or something like that. But we found like this was a problem, right? Like, it was a problem I had seen just in adaptation, and as much as people might not even be able to ride their bikes because of it. And so that was really the problem we started working towards to solve for Mirror technology.
Yeah, it's been such an interesting development with the way body geometry saddles work over the years, in that when we would use a saddle to take pressure off of soft tissue. But the thing that's interesting about pressure and the way pressure works as a system is, if you are exerting 150 pounds of pressure, your body weight on a saddle, and you change the shape of the saddle to where you are coming into contact with that saddle less, so you're focusing that pressure in places that you want, you're still exerting 150 pounds on that saddle, but now it's in a smaller area. So that means that the sensation or that pressure is increased. And so that was always one of the challenges, you know, in working with riders, especially if they'd never been on a body geometry saddle before, was we're now concentrating pressure on bony, bony structure with tendons and muscles around it, which deal with the pressure so much better than the soft tissue does. But for a lot of riders, sometimes that pressure is a different type of discomfort. And that was really the opportunity that kind of presented itself with this. Is like, okay, we've moved pressure away from the soft tissues, but what has that done to the more supportive structure in the body, and that even that some riders still have discomfort with, and how do we start to solve that? And that was where the 3D printing really, you know, gave Garrett the idea to start understanding pressure in a different way and what you could do with a different material that you just can't do with foam.
Yeah, and I'll add it. It really it was actually talking to a rider in the office. I won't name names, but she was telling me how, you know, I'd given her a Mimic saddle a few months prior, and she had loved it. And then her and her partner took a couple of months off from riding, and then they jumped back on their bikes, and they were like, "Man, you know, like we had this great ride, but I gotta tell you, like my sit bones were so sore from just getting used to riding again." And it was like, okay, like, hey, we're on to something there. And it, you know, it just kind of brought back all these other pieces of feedback I had heard through Fit and other folks. So it was a real opportunity there, a real kind of breakthrough with how we can take it further.
And further we did take it.
Yeah. You know, that was the thing, is once we really, you know, found our way forward, it was, you know, a lot of ride testing, a lot of validation. You know, we went through 70 iterations in about 10 months. So that, again, kind of going back to Mimic and the process to develop that versus Mirror, like, yeah, I mean, hey, we talk about the benefits of 3D printing. Like, yeah, that's a real thing, right? Like, you know, it's 3D printing is the medium, and it just so happens to help us move that much quicker through, you know, wacky ideas and bad, you know, good ideas, bad ideas, and to really start to develop a product that does make, you know, does solve for the problem we're trying to solve for. So yeah, 70 iterations. And, you know, obviously some of those iterations were around shape evolution and, you know, cover, texture, and finish, which, you know, you'll see on the saddle is very unique. Actually, both the shape and texture are pretty unique to this saddle. Obviously the density profile and even the substrate, the actual 3D printed material we use, we went through a few to get to the final product. And you can kind of see that with green and black and shiny and unshiny. And yeah, there's a whole lot going on there. That was like a few bins, and me having to stand up. It doesn't look like a lot, but when you have to stand on a ladder to really get the shot right, you know, it's just, you know, trying to show the magnitude of the amount of testing we did in such a quick period of time.
Absolutely, it's an extraordinary process.
Yeah, and we did a lot of rider testing with this too, Garrett. I remember I was on one of the very first prototypes. I know it was like really, really early on. And I remember putting it on my bike and going out and riding it. And it literally felt like I was on a spring. Like my whole, every bump we'd hit, like it literally like compressed and kind of launched me off the saddle. And we're like, okay, well, that's not going to work. So, you know, but what was so cool was to be able to make the changes and then be able to try them so much, you know, so quickly, right?
Yeah, it was amazing. And, you know, it's like not only that, but, you know, we were prototyping on like pretty close to finished product early on, which that also really helps to like kind of close the gap between, you know, something that you put together with like electrical tape and various foams to like something that's like pretty tangible, pretty close to the final product.
Now,
so yeah,
would you cite that as a result of the different manufacturing process, this type of manufacturing process, or the years of research that Retül and Body Geometry were coming to the project with under their belts already that sort of helped close the gap, or ultimately a combination of the two things really converging with the right minds driving this that ultimately enabled us to achieve?
Yeah, I think it's like we took, we have the process. We know like we need to start with the problem and then we solve it, through design. And so, we had that as the foundation. Like, prior to getting into some of the materials and the texturing stuff that we did, these really the key takeaways on this are like these variable density windows, those yellow windows. So, those are oriented in the same way as if any bike fitter that's on here was to look at a pressure map of their rider, they would see these two converging pubic rami, right? Like these two borders that almost come together as you move towards the nose of the saddle. So those variable density windows are absolutely vital in some of that comfort that we were kind of getting to. But that isn't the only hero in this. Like, one thing we found pretty early on in that testing too is that a cover was absolutely imperative to get to some of that comfort. Like, the open hexagons we found were like just not comfortable. You've got almost like this, not cheese grater, but like, you got edges, and who wants to sit on edges? And so the cover material, pushing our manufacturing partner Carbon to add a finished cover material was the first time they'd ever had to make an A surface cover. And it was part of that was so important to get the reduction in pressure, because what you're seeing here is this yellow material is quite a bit softer. The lattice is much thinner, so it's much softer here than it is here. And so you in theory would have a bit of a drop off. It would just you'd feel firm and then soft. And the cover material really turns it from being just like a cliff that you're walking off of into like a trampoline. You think if anyone's like ever walked onto a trampoline, you don't just drop, right? You kind of like, it's firmer on the outside and then you really start to like drop into it. And that's a really similar feeling to riding the saddle, is like you sit into it, but you don't bottom out.
Supportive.
Yeah. And, I think this is when we were really like, okay, the cover material, the lattice density was really getting to a point where like, holy cow, like this is, we're really seeing a big breakthrough here. And so just for some reference, this is the same rider in the same position. And I can confirm that because I was the one, just the fit background like that, if we were trying to maintain as many variables as possible, like that was an important one. I know Scott can talk to like how important you get the position, you have to have the position right to really validate the data. So the exact same position, same rider, same kind of workload, rate of perceived exertion, and you've got this massive difference in just total pressure, right? Like EVA foam, this was actually a level 2 padded power saddle compared to the mirror. So we weren't even doing like an S-Works level 1 padding to this. Like, it's just more peak pressure. That is the huge difference. And for anyone that rides a saddle, like, you'll feel it. And this is like the visualization of like, okay, I can see like this is what I'm feeling. That was a major breakthrough for us. And just going down like just another visual, you can kind of see how the area is almost a little bit bigger, right? And that peak pressure is just less. And that's like some of the major, we were kind of talking about like the trampoline effect, right? You think of like a normal pressure foam. It's like very, you've got the same amount of pressure going through it. It's just over a smaller surface area. whereas Mimic is a much greater surface area and the same pressure. So you don't have that feeling of kind of peak pressure like you would on a normal foam saddle.
And I think what's super critical to understand with that too is that because it's created in a very zonal way, we can put that pressure distribution exactly where we want it, as opposed to, you think about, if you're thinking like, oh, is this going to feel like one of those old school big squishy exercise saddles? No, because I mean, those are soft everywhere, and you sit into the whole thing and it feels like you're sitting in a, just like a pool of gel. But because with this, it's incredibly, focused in terms of where we want that compliancy and how that can be created through the process. You get the support where you want to, and even though you've got a little bit more contact, it's not contact that's in your way. It's not contact that you feel adds friction. It's just designed to support that particular part of the body, as opposed to spreading it out over the entire surface of the saddle.
Yes.
See, now, I have a question in regards to the zonal density there, and those were really fantastic. All of these great illustrations to show that, what we're doing to equalize the pressure across the whole saddle. Now, from a fit standpoint, from you two, my question would be, does this type of saddle construction bear any significance on the process in getting somebody fit on their bike with this saddle?
I can go first, or Scott, you want to hit it?
Oh, go ahead, Garrett. I think we're going to say the same thing anyway.
Yeah. I mean, that really the theme that you'll maybe hear from Scott, but for sure from my perspective is, anytime you change the saddle, it's worth a full reevaluation. I mean, yes, it is a power shape, but as you'll see in a few slide, like another slide, it's a slightly different shape. And so the fit characteristics most certainly change. And so put the fitter hat on. I would want to see someone, back in for an evaluation. And if it's been over a year, for sure, reevaluate just the overall position in general. But yeah, it's not always just plug and play and go on your way kind of thing. It takes, it's worth getting reevaluated for a new product like this.
It would certainly seem to me, I mean, this is not an inexpensive product. This is a premier product that we are talking about. So from a value add standpoint to the rider, if nothing else, I'm sure if you're going to spend the cheddar on something like this, take the rest of your necessary precautions to make sure that you're really getting the most out of it, right? Is that ultimately what it boils down to?
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you want to get the most out of the saddle, and like Garrett said, the saddle truly is kind of the heart. It's the center point. It's the heart and soul of your fit. It's where, as a fitter, we all start. And I've always said, as soon as you make a change to the saddle, you're ultimately making changes throughout the rest of the body. So even though they are really similar in shape, and you're going to probably have some small changes that are going to occur, and you want to address those.
Yeah, it's I think one of the things I'm most proud about with working in Specialized is we have a great saddle product, this great saddle business and brand, but it's the combination of the saddles and the methodology behind Retül and body geometry, that the combination is really what makes us such an amazing company and product for this. It's not just one or the other. I don't say I'm making saddles that are going to solve everyone's problem. Yeah, that's why we offer the saddles, but in all reality, it also comes down to getting the right position with that saddle. That 1-2 punch is what makes, in some ways makes my job easier. It's still challenging, but if you've got this great kind of army of bike fitters and retailers that are really invested in getting the riders in the right position, the saddles are it's just such a cohesive relationship.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Garrett. You think about, if you have an unhealthy or a not great position on your bike, and those are the kind of riders I remember that you'd meet and they were never happy with any saddle. Every saddle was bad, no matter what. And you look at the position and you say, well, yeah, the way you're sitting on your bike is not, it's just not going to work. And you can keep trying saddles all day long, but until we get your position dialed in, none of them are going to work. So the nice thing about working, with Retül and, having the technology to know that riders are in the same position and using the 3D motion capture system that Retül provides allows us to know that the rider's in the same exact position, moving through space in the same exact way, so that when you start making changes to the saddle, you know what all your variables are. And the position's good to start, they're in the same position, and then you can actually understand what really changed when you've made an equipment change. And and that's what's so cool about Retül is that your local retailer and local bike fitter can do that same exact thing with you as a rider and helping you choose your equipment as you're trying to figure out how to make yourself more comfortable on your bike.
Hear, hear. And yeah, just going into shape, Jared, that's a kind of a good segue too. Like this was this was definitely a result of hearing riders through my days in Retül and here, going to the SBCU team and talking to what they've heard from retailers and talking to retailers too, is that, we make two really knockout shapes in the Power and Power Arc. Like they're really good for a lot of riders, and we've seen huge conversion to those shapes. But we've definitely seen a real opportunity to kind of the Goldilocks, like not too hot, not too cold, right in the middle kind of idea here, which is a power. The power I think everyone really loves for the support, right? The really flat surface. But some of those that don't like the power for some of the fit reasons go to the arc. And it's generally sometimes related to the flare here. We saw a real opportunity with this shape to do something right in the middle. And it's like, yeah, the technology is groundbreaking to develop this as one piece, and the zonal densities and all that. But I think the shape is also a real winner with this product. It's something that's it's something we've needed, and this is like a great way to go that direction for sure. And yeah, I think that's for anyone out there that is that person, like, oh, I ride a Power and I've tried an arc and I don't love it, or I've rode an arc but I've tried a Power and I don't love it. This is really potentially that solve for sure.
Garrett, you're really speaking my number, I think.
Yeah, I saw the
I think
I was like, I don't know, am I doing something wrong here?
Yeah. No, I'm your guy right there. I know that feeling all too well. If I'm on a Power, it is supportive. It's it really checks a lot of boxes. But that hook area, that flare that you talked about, is a problem with my legs, and I feel like it ends up driving me too far forward on the saddle. That at that point I'm not really getting the benefits of the support. I get on a Power Arc, that issue is remedied, but I do notice the lack of support of that flatter shelf area of the Power. So, I mean, for a year now or more, I've been constantly going back and forth, convinced that I need to do something. There's something I need to do to get that sorted out. And here you are. I'm not crazy.
Yeah,
you did it.
And yeah, thank you. Good. And I would say though, in the last piece of this one that kind of really drives it home and one for sure among those like 70 different saddles that you saw on the screen was figuring out the cover material. So we actually worked with Carbon not only to create this cover, this A surface for the saddle, but also created this new kind of solventless UV curing process to give it this really like satiny kind of matte finish. And that, yeah, that's also, you know, definitely a look side of things. It looks super cool, but was absolutely designed for a functional purpose. And so it's, to me, I like to say it offers the right amount of grip and slip, which is really true there, because we had like the shinier, kind of plasticky look that you may have seen in some 3D printed stuff, but that actually leads to a really, really grippy saddle. And because the saddle is designed for riders kind of in various, positions, from TT to gravel to enduro racers, if they want, we wanted a saddle that a rider could move around on but still also feel like perched. And that kind of that overall combination is really what makes the Mirror so freaking rad.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine there had to have been also some consideration to durability of a cover. We're talking about, like you said, a saddle that's not just serving a road rider, a triathlete, time trialer. You know, we're seeing plenty of people on mountain bikes, enduro bikes, trail bikes, XC race, road, you name it, everything. This fits and it works for the rider. So what were did you have any sort of tough times or trials in terms of nailing the durability of this cover?
Not really. It ended up being, like if you think of crashing on any saddle and you kind of get like some of the scuffing and stuff on the sides, it's a very similar issue. I think what most people talk about or most concerned with are like, oh man, I'm never going to be able to clean this thing, because it's like a very open lattice. But I know we're in California, but I'm not originally from California. And it's like, we packed this thing with mud. And actually one of the first athletes that really liked this was Chris Blevins, who's a cross country XCO athlete of ours. And the stuff gets muddy, but if you get a chance to look at a saddle up close, it's actually really there's a lot of drainage and ventilation, you could say. And you just take a really strong stream of water, and it's mud and stuff, just it'll clear out. Like it's really not as big a deal as some folks have talked about.
Sure. Or as you could easily speculate by looking at a picture of.
Yeah, I mean, and I could totally see why folks think that, but it actually drains water great, and mud for sure. You just got to hit with the hose.
Great. That's a sound piece of buyer's advice.
Yeah.
And Scott, did you had mentioned one of the very early prototypes that you had an opportunity of testing. Were you involved as through the development process of this?
I was involved a bit early on. Like I said, I rode several of the early prototypes, especially when Garrett was trying to get a wide range of people on different bikes and and different styles of riders and different weights and sizes. And and then as it got more developed and they got closer and closer, I didn't ride as many of the prototypes. I'd say I probably was maybe in the first third of the development process, and then it went on quite a ways, from where I stopped working with it to the finished product. And I would say, the finished product is, again, 70 close, some variation. I mean, I literally think I was on one of the first 2 or 3 versions of it. So it's come so far, it's unbelievable. I mean, when the one I rode, there was no hint of a cover like this whatsoever. And and you think about like all those different aspects that have to go into it. I mean, even just, how does Lycra, the Lycra of your shorts interact with the top of the saddle? I mean, that's one of those variables that, either can feel really good or it can feel really terrible. And it just is something that's, such a small detail, but it goes into all of this. And, but what I was involved with, and I think is still one of the most important things, is that, to keep in mind that for a body geometry product to be a body geometry product, it's not just about the material, it's about what's it do. So we solve a problem, which is, built with purpose. We want to build around an idea. What are we trying to fix? But then, what's the science behind it that allows it to qualify, so to speak, as a body geometry product? Because we either have to improve your performance, or essentially make you faster, reduce your chance of injury, or make you more comfortable. And it's got to do at least one of those three things. And great, if it does two or three, that's even better. But for body geometry, it has to be one of those three items. And interestingly enough, I think that proving something is more comfortable than what came before is actually probably one of the hardest things to prove. You can measure wattage and you can measure performance pretty easily. There are ways absolutely to quantify the reduction of injury, and we've seen that even in medical journals with the body geometry shoe, where we've had peer reviews that say there's less chance of injury when you wear a body geometry shoe. But comfort is one of those things that can be really subjective, and you have to come up with a scientific way of measuring it. And I think that's what the team has done an incredible job, is what is a standard of comfort? How do you measure it? And then how can you prove that it's significantly, that it's a significant result? And that was one of the things that the team was able to do that helped even take body geometry a step further, is understanding how do we quantify comfort.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was obviously once we had gotten to a point where it was very close to a final product, we utilized our human performance team, which was the team I came from actually before, out of the Retül office, to do that validation. And we used 20 subjects, 10 men, 10 women, and created this comfort evaluation to really get us there to really make sure that this was a body geometry product through and through, and really solved for the problem we were trying to solve for.
And having that group and structuring that in such a way, was that the first time that had been done?
No, we've been actually using that process for a few other things, such as the body geometry chamois, the mimic saddle. This at this point, this test is a really good test for us to see the progression of the product and to really put that body geometry stamp on the product and make sure that we've really delivered on our promise to our retailers and our customers. So that was the human performance team. Like, it's nice. They're really, in my opinion, like a third party. I mean, they're not biased. Like, you've got Todd Carver running that team, and he'll let us know if things aren't looking good. And fortunately, we haven't had that discussion yet. So we've been delivering on what we're working on.
It's all working.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. And what to me, what a great way to wrap up on this whole talk here. We're up on our hour. I must let you both go, but thanks a ton for your time and your expertise and running us through the latest and greatest and this mirror saddle and everything that went into it, and kind of shedding some light on what ultimately is the future, moving forward in some way, shape, or form. This is a big step, a disruption, and things will be different from here moving forward. That's totally exciting.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for the time, Jared. That was great.
You bet. All right, we'll catch up with you guys later.
All right. Nice seeing everybody. Take care out there.
Bye.